The deadliest fight in the history of aviation wasn't fought on drawing boards or boardrooms. It was settled aloft, where two machines, based on entirely different ideas about how to kill, battled each other. On the flip side, the F-4 Phantom II, an abomination of American innovation. Twin engines roaring, nearly 20 tons of metal teeming with radar and missiles. This was not just a fighter, this was a flying fortress designed to destroy anything that would have the temerity to stand against it. On the other hand, the Mig-21 fishbed, Soviet engineering distilled to its most deadly form. Bantam, swift, knife-sharp. A knife fighter who could cut through the air and be gone before his enemy had a chance to react. Two aircraft, two radically different air combat philosophies. One was based on brute firepower and technology, the other on speed, agility, and close enough to see the terror in their enemy's eyes. And alongside, they wrote the bloodiest page of aerial warfare history. From the jungles of Vietnam's treetop canopy to the Middle East's scorching deserts, their battles rewritten everything that anyone ever thought they knew about dogfighting. Hit the like button and subscribe because you are in for the most intense air war ever fought. Two legends, two philosophies, but in the end, only one could reign supreme over the sky. It's the 1960s, and the world hangs in the balance of nuclear war. American strategists are obsessed with one apocalyptic threat: hordes of Soviet bombers filled with atomic warheads for U.S. cities. The solution? Create the most technologically advanced interceptor ever devised. Enter the F-4 Phantom II. When this beast first roared to life, it broke all preconceptions about what a fighter plane could accomplish. 19 tons of payload capacity, necessarily heavier than the heaviest World War II bombers. Twin J-79s that accelerated it down the runway like a rocket, producing thunderclaps that could break windows miles distant. But the Phantom's secret was its mind. Equipped with the most advanced radar ever mounted on a fighter, it could lead targets into sight to within what seemed magical distances. 8 missiles sat on its wings, enough firepower to strike several enemies in a single pass. This was America's answer: awe-inspiring technological superiority. And it's here that the tale begins to make its first dramatic shift. The Phantom was built on a revolutionary credo that would prove to be both prophetic and nearly disastrous. The designers were so confident in their missiles that they took a bold choice: no gun, no cannon, no close-in weapon of any kind. The reasoning was simple. The dogfighting era was over. Missiles fired from out of sight would dominate every air battle. At the same time, on the opposite side of the Iron Curtain, Soviet designers reached very different conclusions. The Mig-21 took its first flight in 1959. Where American engineers added weight and complexity, the Soviets stripped everything to the bone. Single engine instead of two. Delta wing sharpened to a knife's edge. The entire plane weighed less than half the weight of a Phantom, but every ounce counted toward one end, winning the battle by turning. The Mig-21 carried only 2 missiles, with heat-seeking abilities, but it carried one thing the Phantom did not: a built-in 23mm cannon. Soviet pilots remembered World War II lessons. When technology fails you, when missiles miss, you need guns. The philosophical chasm could not have been greater. Americans bet everything on technology and missiles from afar. Soviets bet on simplicity, speed, and sheer fighting ability. Both nations were about to discover which philosophy would survive the fire of war. American F-4 Phantoms were flying over North Vietnamese airspace in 1965 like steel sharks. Washington war planners were hopeful. How could the uncivilized North Vietnamese Air Force possibly menace the world's most sophisticated Air Force? They were about to learn a harsh lesson. Hidden in reinforced bunkers were Mig-21 squadrons. At the controls were North Vietnamese pilots who had mastered all American weaknesses, every vulnerable spot in the heavy Phantom's defenses. The battlefield scene seemed too one-sided. The Phantom could see 30 miles to the enemy. Its AIM-7 Sparrow missiles could see targets at distances the naked eye could not. Theoretically, an entire flight of several MiGs could be destroyed by one Phantom before even the MiGs knew what was happening. Theory and war differ. The Vietnamese jungle terrain wreaked havoc with planned radar systems for open-sea intercepts. Engagement rules were strict, and pilots could not fire until they could visually acquire targets. And those supposedly superior missiles had a chilling tendency to miss or malfunction. The technology giant was dragged into short-range dogfights, where radar was secondary to maneuverability, computers were secondary to pilot skill, and the Mig-21's teeth-sharp turning ability became deadly. MiG drivers, guided by sophisticated ground control intercept units, perfected the ambush. They would stay concealed in ground clutter until American formations passed over. They would then go vertical, coming from nowhere behind Phantoms before anyone realized they were there. The Phantoms had a killer weakness. They left dense, dark smoke trails visible over miles. With invisibility equaling survival in the skies, the powerful Phantom trumpeted its arrival like a billboard. When MiGs got into cannon range, Phantom pilots discovered the painful reality of their missiles-only policy. With long-range missiles useless, close-in and heat-seekers struggling to lock onto maneuvering MiGs, Phantom pilots were really defenseless in turning engagements. The stage was set for one of the greatest tactical masterstrokes in aeronautical history. At the end of 1966, Colonel Robin Olds was frustrated. A World War II ace with 12 kills, he watched as his squadrons were harassed by Mig-21s, coming in on bombing runs like ghosts before vanishing into thin air. The North Vietnamese had learned to avoid head-on combat and instead attack vulnerable bombers. Something had to be done, and Robin Olds had a plan so clever that it would go down in history as one of the greatest aerial ambushes ever conceived. The plan was stunning. Bring the MiGs to them. F-4 Phantom jets would pose as F-105 Thunder Chief bombers, the primary target MiGs loved to intercept. They'd run the same sorties, at the same times, on the same air paths, on the same call signs and radio frequencies. To North Vietnamese radar, it would be just another routine bombing mission. But as MiGs took to the skies to intercept what they thought were unarmed bombers, they would find well-equipped Phantom squadrons. January 2nd, 1967 dawned over North Vietnam. Hanoi radar detects familiar bomber signatures closing on strategic targets. Orders crackle. Mig-21 squadrons scramble immediately. 14 Mig-21s lift from North Vietnamese bases, pilots confident they are setting up to ambush helpless bombers. They push up hard, hoping to catch before escort fighters can react. But when they get close, something horribly wrong. The bombers flash on powerful radar screens. Missile locks snap onto climbing MiGs. Colonel Olds' voice crackles over the radio with words that would echo through aviation history. This is Olds. We have MiGs airborne. In 12 minutes, 7 Mig-21s were shot out of the sky. All the Phantoms survived. Operation Bolo demonstrated that better tactics and deception could turn any battle around. It demonstrated, however, the deadly game of chess air combat had become, where plotting 3 moves ahead meant victory or oblivion. The MiGs had received a bad beating, but they were far from done. The North Vietnamese gained bitter lessons from Operation Bolo, yet they did not retreat. They learned, adapted, and returned deadlier than ever. During 1968, North Vietnamese pilots had mastered new tactics that pushed every MiG-21 asset to its limits. They employed higher rates of climb to climb above American formations, then dived, slashing attacks, depending on speed and agility to break Phantom radar locks. Ground control would track American forces from liftoff to landing, calculating the optimal release time. MiG fighter pilots would attack when Americans were most vulnerable, well-fueled and loaded with bombs, ready for bombing runs and unable to maneuver. From close in, the Mig-21 was positively lethal. Its delta wing allowed it to turn inside the more massive Phantom, and its 23mm cannon could shred American aircraft. North Vietnamese pilots mastered vertical combat, using superior power-to-weight ratios to climb on top of adversaries, then diving for the kill. Captain Nguyen Van Kock exemplified this deadly evolution. Piloting his MiG-21, he shot down 9 American aircraft, including a few Phantoms. His tactic was horrifically effective. Use ground control for a perfect ambush position, strike quickly and hard, then disappear before reinforcements could come. By the time the hostilities ceased, MiG-21s had shot down a score or more of American aircraft, proving that David could kill Goliath if David was gutsy, fast, and clever enough to reach him. As Vietnam receded, the Phantom MiG duel was just starting. The proxy wars of the Cold War were spreading, and nowhere would the duel be fiercer than over the Middle East. Surrounded by hostile neighbors, Israel became the principal Phantom operator outside America. Behind borders, Egypt, Syria, and other Arab nations built air forces around Soviet-supplied MiG-21s. The world was preparing to test the Cold War's last aerial proving ground. The Six-Day War of 1967 offered a taste. Israeli Phantoms, piloted by extraordinarily trained airmen, destroyed Arab air power in preemptive attacks. But the Arabs learned, reconstructed, and geared up for Round 2. Round 2 arrived in earth-shaking bloodletting in October of 1973, the Yom Kippur War. On October 6th, as Israelis were observing their holiest day, Egyptian and Syrian forces launched coordinated surprise attacks. Hundreds of MiG-21s jumped to challenge Israeli air supremacy. That was followed by the biggest air battles since World War II. The air battle of El Mansoura on October 14th became legend. Across the Nile Delta, more than 160 planes, Israeli Phantoms, Egyptian MiG-21s, and support planes entwined in a gargantuan furball a dozen miles long. Egyptian MiG pilots, instructed by Soviet pilots and piloting upgraded aircraft, used coordinated attack methods to overwhelm Israeli formations. They attacked in waves, using numbers and surprise to gain kills before Israeli pilots could react. Several F-4 Phantoms were shot down, showing that even sophisticated Western aircraft could be defeated. But Israelis struck back mercilessly. Their Phantom pilots, among the finest trained in the world, used superior tactics and coordination to turn the tables. They made use of sophisticated electronic warfare methods to jam the enemy communications and radars, shattering the careful coordination that made MiG attacks deadly. Both asserted victory. Egyptians demonstrated Arab pilots could keep pace with the mythical Israeli Air Force. Israelis demonstrated that training and experience could beat numerically superior foes. But the real winner was the ongoing innovation of air fighting itself. Neither aircraft remained static. War precipitated desperate evolution, and both evolved constantly throughout their competition. Americans, having been stung by the lessons of Vietnam, made essential Phantom adjustments. Most significant was the addition of the M61 Vulcan gun, a 6-barreled Gatling type of 6,000 rounds per minute gun. Phantom pilots now had close-in weapons for when missiles did not work or hostile fighters became too close. Improved missiles followed. The untested early AIM-9 Sidewinder was upgraded with better seeker heads and better motors. So was the AIM-7 Sparrow, which became more precise and tougher to nullify. And, perhaps most importantly, American pilots learned to fight differently. They developed tactics that exploited Phantom's strengths and minimized its weaknesses. They learned to challenge superior radar and missiles at extended ranges to avoid turning battles where MiGs were strong, and to coordinate attacks to saturate enemy defenses. The Soviets continued to upgrade the Mig-21. There were new variants every so often. The Mig-21 MF with superior avionics, the Mig-21 BIS with stronger engines and better missiles. Every such improvement filled some special gap without altering the aircraft's basic philosophy. Soviet flight training schemes evolved to provide optimum Mig-21 performance. Pilots used coordinated unit combat, utilizing ground control intercept to provide optimum attack position. Pilots practiced vertical combat, using superior climb rates to gain positional advantage over heavier Western aircraft. The contest had become an arms race, where each side dared the other to greater innovation and tactical sophistication. By the final decades of the Cold War, both aircraft were old. Newer, more advanced fighters were coming into service: the F-15 Eagle, the F-16 Fighting Falcon, Mig-29 Fulcrum, and Su-27 Flanker. But the Phantom MiG rivalry already established the general character of air combat in the modern age. Their dogfights paid in full the advanced 1960s only missile credo as preposterously premature. Guns still ruled close-in battle. They demonstrated that no technology could compensate for superior pilot training and tactical savvy. Most importantly, they showed that there were no set rules when it comes to air fighting. Every aircraft, no matter how advanced, had strengths and weaknesses. The victor is the one who best utilizes strengths and minimizes weaknesses. Numbers are only half of it. In Vietnam, each side claimed victory on different terms and fought kill ratios. American reports tended to give F-4 Phantoms favorable exchange rates versus MiG-21s, with margins far more low-key than they had anticipated before the war began. North Vietnamese accounts presented a different story, claiming that their MiGs shot down a greater number of American aircraft than they lost. The truth lies between these claims. The only undisputed fact is that both aircraft were lethal under the right conditions. Phantoms flourished in beyond visual range engagements where radar and missile advantages were exploitable. MiG-21s dominated in close-range turning engagements where pilot skill and agility took center stage. In the Middle East, Israeli Phantom pilots tallied impressive kill-to-loss ratios against Arab MiG-21s, particularly after the Six-Day War. But during the Yom Kippur War, when the Arabs had improved training and better coordinated actions, battles became much closer. The F-4 Phantom retired from U.S. service in the 1990s after 3 decades on the front lines. It had served not just as a fighter, but as a bomber, an attack reconnaissance platform, and an electronic warfare airplane. Fewer military aircraft have proven so versatile or survived so long, performing so many varied missions. The MiG-21 miraculously still operates today, more than 60 years after the first flight. Refined versions continue to soar with air forces worldwide. It was the fastest, mass-produced supersonic fighter ever to take shape, with more than 11,000 aircraft manufactured in numerous variations and operated by more than 40 nations. Their air-to-air battles didn't just characterize air-to-air warfare. They molded the path of military aviation as a whole. Lessons learned in their wars created better training programs, like the U.S. Navy's Top Gun School, better missiles with higher kill opportunities, and more sophisticated methods that still guide the conduct of air war today. Modern-day fighter planes still reflect the lessons of this competition: the relevance of redundant systems, the need to have both beyond visual range and close-range capability, and the utmost priority of training pilots all find their genesis in engagements between these two legends. The Phantom and the Mig-21. Technology versus agility. Two legends who rewrote the laws of air combat. The Phantom symbolized American technological superiority, overwhelming firepower, and advanced radar. The Mig-21 symbolized Soviet practicality, simplicity, speed, and deadly accuracy in the dogfight. Both philosophies were fatal. Both fighters left their indelible mark on aviation history. From the tactical masterstroke of Operation Bolo to the thunderous dogfighting over the Middle East, they proved that in air-to-air combat, there are no winners with absolute certainty. Only pilots and machines better suited to the contest at hand. So which would you choose in the ultimate face-off? The technological giant or the agile assassin? Comment your choice below. Hit the like button if this story blew your socks off. And subscribe for more fantastic military history. Because their historic confrontations prove that sometimes it's not where you're coming from, but if you dare to push it to its extreme, when the chips are all or nothing.